Kent Myers. I'm Mick Cornett, and it's time for the verdict.
As a part of its traditional and continuing commitment to public and community service, Crowe and Dunleavy Law Firm presents The Verdict, an objective discussion of contemporary legal issues hosted by Kent Myers. And also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma. Welcome to The Verdict, and thanks for joining us. I'm Mick Cornett, and I am joined by one of Oklahoma's top legal experts, Kent Myers. And Kent's today's show is called The Trial Lawyers Are Coming. What do you mean by that?
Well, we all have heard the term trial lawyers, trial lawyers. It's kind of named because some people think of trial lawyers like the British invading the colonies. The trial lawyers are coming. I've seen a cartoon recently that showed trial lawyers parachuting into Afghanistan as the U.S. secret weapon, that if we'd ever turned the trial lawyers loose on the Taliban, the war would have been much shorter. The term trial lawyer is a term that has taken on a meaning of its own that we'll want to explore today and in a subsequent show, by the way, because every trial has at least two trial lawyers. One trial lawyer has a client that's trying to get something, and the other trial lawyer is trying to keep something, and they are adversary to each other. But when we see the phrase trial lawyer used in the newspaper, it takes on a different context. It takes on a context that has been identified with plaintiffs, to some extent even identified with Democrats, and there are some criticisms that have been leveled at the trial lawyers that we'll have a chance to evaluate on whether they're meritorious, whether there's anything to them or not. As a matter of fact, our two guests are both trial lawyers.
And once again, you brought in two really good guests.
We have very good guests today.
All right, we'll take a short break and then meet our two fascinating guests. You're watching The Verdict with Mick Cornett and Kent Myers.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
I enrich our cultural landscape.
I help define our quality of life.
I am one of 4,000 artists in central Oklahoma who receive
support from Allied Arts, this community's united arts organization.
I am an allied artist.
In Oklahoma, there are more than 1,600 children waiting to be adopted. They're of all ages, and for many, home has been a source of pain and conflict. They've dreamed of finding a better life and a loving family. Consider adoption. For more information, call 1-877-OK-SWIFT or visit the website www.okdhs.org. Adopt. It may be the toughest job you'll ever love.
And Blankenship has stopped at the line of scrimmage. No gain on the play. Leading at 4th and 7 on the Tiger 46-yard line. 38 seconds on the clock. The Tigers have no choice but to go. Wiggins had to do the kicking. Here's the snap. And the kick is away.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all of the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. Oklahoma Lawyers for Children has over 350 of the best attorneys and volunteers in Oklahoma County who donate their time and services to represent children. For more information, call 405-23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers is going to introduce our guests.
Really pleased today to have two good guests that can tell us a lot about the trial lawyer subject. Am I right? is a reunion for me, a classmate at OU Law School and undergraduate at University of Oklahoma, Mr. Jim Sturdivant. Jim is a lawyer at Gable and Gottwalls in Tulsa. He's been practicing law 38 plus years at the same law firm. Prior to that, he was a Marine Corps infantry officer. He's a fellow in the American College of Trial Lawyers, and he has been a friend of mine for, well, I quit counting at 45 years, but it's been a long time. And Jim, friend, it's good to have you here on our show.
Thank you.
On my left is Pat Carr. Pat is once again, an OU graduate, undergraduate, and law school, where he graduated with distinction. Pat's a 28-year lawyer, also practicing in Tulsa, but also in Oklahoma City and Fort Smith in the firm of Carr and Carr. Pat has the distinction of having served as a judge on Oklahoma's Temporary Court of Appeals, and he is the current president of the Oklahoma Trial Lawyers Association. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Today we're talking about the kind of jocular topic, the trial lawyers are coming, but it's serious in the sense that we want our viewers to know a lot more about trial lawyers when they're finished than they do when they start. Tell us, Pat, who are the trial lawyers in Oklahoma and how do they get that name?
Well, the trial lawyers are the attorneys who protect people's rights in the courtroom. You know, you mentioned Afghanistan. Well, here in the United States and here in Oklahoma, we settle our disputes in the courtroom under the rule of law. And in Afghanistan, as we all know, unfortunately, it's by the rule of might and the gun and the bullet. And so thanks to our judicial system, to the rule of law and the trial lawyers, we settle our disputes peacefully in the courtroom.
Jim, the term trial lawyer is typically understood sometimes in a joking context, sometimes in a demeaning context. How do you understand the term trial lawyer, and what does it mean to you?
Well, litigation is a process. It begins with two people who have a problem that they need to be worked out. It could be anything from debt collection to a serious personal injury situation or a products liability case. Frequently, the parties will even discuss a resolution of their dispute before litigation begins. And then once litigation begins, you enter into a process by which the parties learn more about each other's position. If you have experienced, intelligent lawyers and reasonable lawyers on both sides of the case.
There are such things.
In 90% of the, at least 90% of the cases in Oklahoma, civil cases, they're worked out without a jury being put in a box or a trial being taken. So the, quote, trial lawyer, as we see it on television, that's the rare case. That's not the run-of-the-mill case.
Because a lot of people have their perception of the trial lawyer from what they see on television and in the movies. First of all, is that perception fair? And secondly, how does that perception weigh on the public?
I don't think it's fair or typical of the lawyers in Oklahoma City or Tulsa or the 77 counties of Oklahoma. Most of the cases, the vast majority of the cases, are worked out between the lawyers after we go through what we call the discovery process, where nobody has any secrets. You put all your cards on the table, and the weaknesses and the strengths of the two or three parties in the case are made known, and frankly, the resources to pay a recovery are often made known. And then the lawyers sit down and reason with their clients and strike a bargain. The case where that process fails, that's what the courthouse is for, and we call that's the tiebreaker. And that's when you go to the courtroom. Well, unfortunately, it's the courtroom part of it that the public sees.
Well, the other part wouldn't be very, very interesting.
That's correct.
Pat, I know that the Trial Lawyers Association, of which you're now the current president, has put out some information that the jury system in this country is under attack or is under criticism. And do you see your organization as having a role to play in that regard?
Well, certainly. We're committed to the jury system. The jury system, as you know and as many of our viewers may know, is centuries old. It has its roots in English common law, and it came here. It's been a rather unique system for the United States and for England also. It's proven itself to be an item which helps us stabilize society, because we take people from all walks of life who settle these disputes. The jury system is a way in which we know over time has produced honest, fair results. It takes a tremendous burden off of our judges, because their job is to rule upon the law. It's the jury's job to decide the facts. So it's extremely important that we maintain the jury system. And it is under assault from various areas, and has been for quite some time, because as powerful interests seek special privileges here and there, they just choose not to be accountable, or don't want to become accountable to a jury system like you and I individually would be. So it's important for us to maintain the system so we do have accountability in our society.
Let me stay with you for a minute, and I want to change the subject. Part of that jury system sometimes results in awards, very large awards, sometimes huge punitive damage awards. What is the purpose of punitive damages? Why do we have punitive damages in this country?
Well, punitive damages are to punish really outrageous conduct and to serve as a deterrent for outrageous conduct, reckless conduct in disregard of the law and public safety. And I might say in Oklahoma, it's just simply not a jury question. A judge has to submit the case to a jury. A judge has to pass upon the jury's award to make sure it was reasonable. Then you have an intermediate court that reviews what the trial judge did. And then you have our Oklahoma Supreme Court that reviews what the intermediate court and the trial court and the jury does.
Lots of checks and balances.
Lots of checks and balances, and that's before it even gets into the federal system, if it does. On some occasions that may happen. But as I said, it's to deter really outrageous bad conduct. And I brought a graphic that I might show something here, which many of our... This shows the incidence of internal tire tread separation reports that were going to Firestone that were not being communicated to the public before sometime in 2000. And you can see from the graphic how those incidents of tread separations really started zooming up in 1995, but yet the public wasn't told about this. And we know now that some 270 people approximately have been killed by tire separations from these tires, and over 800 people injured. Well, this is really in reckless disregard of the public's safety.
Okay,
so this.
Thank you for the graphic.
Sure.
Go ahead.
And so this would be the kind of a case that of a situation where punitive damages would serve as a deterrent, because corporations. Bottom line is the most important thing to it, and it's governed and controlled by the rule of law. And our jury system is very important in establishing standards that tell the corporate management how to govern its affairs and how to comply with the law. So this would be an instance where punitive damages may appropriately be submitted to a jury.
Let me jump in the middle here and get us to a short break. We're discussing the image and the actions of trial lawyers. You're watching The Verdict.
A videotape cannot teach our children to swim. A video game cannot capture the warmth of a campfire. And no TV show nor movie can help a child reach out to make a friend. But a campfire camp can show kids a world of experience they've never known before. For at Campfire, life is not something to be watched. It's something to be lived. The first fire we light is the fire within. Campfire, boys and girls.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable, private Catholic education, balanced with dedication to community and service, makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
On Broadway is Oklahoma's premier youth musical theater company.
Bringing our daughter here was one of the smartest things we've ever done.
I've learned a lot. I've gained a lot of confidence. They helped me develop talents I never knew I had.
And it's fun.
On
Broadway, Oklahoma's premier youth musical theater company. Now enrolling in Edmond. Call 330-CAST. That's 330-2278.
Every day, in state governments throughout the country, crucial decisions are being made that affect the lives of children and their families. But as this process takes place, children are often left voiceless. When these children raise their hands to be heard, is anyone listening? There are people listening. They are child advocates. Join us and raise your hand for kids.
Mick Cornett and Kent Myers back on The Verdict. We're discussing the images involving trial lawyers and their work as well.
Yes. When we quit, we had been talking about what trial lawyers have done about preserving the jury system. There is another group that should be mentioned in this, and I'd like Jim Sturdivant perhaps to comment on this, and those are those individuals that are involved in what's called tort reform. We see activities from time to time, both on a local, state level and on a national level, to reform our tort laws. Jim, explain to our viewers generally what does that involve, and generally who are the groups that are involved in that?
Well, I think the tort reform from the defense side has been led by those segments of our society that frequently wind up paying verdicts and settlements in civil litigation. You have the insurance companies, you have the major manufacturing concerns, automobiles, electrical appliances, you have the medical community, the drug companies, the doctors. And they're the main groups that I think finance the lobbying effort for what is called tort reform. And that happens both at the state and the federal level. I just read recently about a bill that actually passed the House of Representatives that, according to the newspaper story that I read, would, for a practical matter, mean that all class actions must be brought in federal court. That hasn't passed the Senate yet, and I don't know what the future of it would be, but that would be a major change in the way...
and that's tort reform.
That would be tort reform. You have restrictions on punitive damages. You have you have some new restrictions on who can bring a class action and be the class representative. These are all designed to erect barriers that a plaintiff who wants to prosecute a class action or a mass tort case, if you will, that they must clear, and they're difficult.
Pat, let me ask you. You've been involved in matters like this. Is our system in need of reform?
No, it's not in need of reform. If you look at the filings over time, you'll see that tort cases, that's civil actions where somebody's been hurt or the property's been injured in some way.
And by the way, you've taught torts, have you not, in various seminars?
Well, in various seminars, that's correct. And you'll see that of all filings at the courthouse, tort cases only make up a small percentage, about approximately 5% of those cases. And as Jim mentioned earlier, only a tiny fraction of those actually go to trial. And so there's no litigation explosion in our state. There's no litigation explosion involving torts across the United States. So the system isn't in need of any kind of reform like that, like what's suggested by the tort reformers. What's important is to keep our corporations and our institutions accountable to individuals, because all of us drive cars where we can be hurt by defective components. All of us want good medical care. We want negligent doctors to be responsible for their acts if we or our loved ones are injured. So that's what the tort system is all about, and it's essentially administered by trained judges who are fair, who've been there for years, who are reviewed by other judges. So the system is in place, it's functioning well, and we need to preserve it, because here in the United States we have a high level of freedom, and one of the reasons we have freedom is that we have a great amount of confidence in our institutions.
I want to change the subject just a minute, and let's talk about political activities. We don't talk about political things very much on this show, but trial lawyers are tied to political candidates, at least in newspaper articles. It's hard to read an article about former President Clinton that didn't say something about his support from the trial lawyers. President Bush has been reported in the press as not having the support nor wanting the support of the trial lawyers. Jim, are most of the tort reformers Republicans and most of the trial lawyers Democrats? Is that the way that works?
I never thought of it that way, but you know, I must say that I think that the plaintiff's bar has been much more effective in the last 15 years in their political activities than the defense bar. They're better organized, they seem to be well financed, and they have been very effective at the state and national level in supporting legislation that helps their purpose. On the other hand, you see legislation coming down that limiting punitive damages, making it more difficult to bring a class action, and so the defense bar, if you will, has been effective there. I think that's the way the political system works.
Well, you raise a very good point that I'd like to just see if I understand correctly. Much of the press will tie the trial lawyers to political activity trying to meet a certain agenda. What you're telling us is that the defense lawyers, the lawyers who are on the other side of the table from the trial lawyers, are doing the very same thing, just espousing a different position.
And perhaps, yes, and perhaps they haven't been as successful in selling their position as the plaintiff's bar, if you will.
Pat, is it appropriate for trial lawyers to be active politically in trying to get certain either things preserved or new things enacted?
It certainly is. I think just from a mechanical point of view, we see the law operating on a day-to-day basis. We have ideas about how the law could be made more efficient. We see inequities in the law where people should have some kind of a redress in the courts of law, but they presently don't, or where there's an unfair advantage. And we work to correct what we think are inequities in the system, to where the system is over time fairer. So since we operate in a society which is under the rule of law, it's important as trial lawyers that we work hard to make sure that the law is fair, because with a fair law we have a just and stable society which over time makes a better life for all of us.
Less than a minute to go.
Jim, let me ask you, is our judicial system out of control in any respect? Is it broken? Does it need massive fixing from either side?
I don't think so. I mean, I think...
You've tried cases on both sides of the fence, on the plaintiff's side and on the defense side.
And I've tried them in small counties and large counties, and
the system works.
I think that the system, by and large, works. Now, when the wheels do come off at a trial, you have two levels of appellate review to pursue, and, you know, in the great majority of cases, I think a good result, an acceptable result, is achieved through the process, with the one caveat that time is involved.
Yeah. Short answer, Pat, is the system out of control? Or
I would completely agree with Jim. The system overall functions very well.
We're going to have to wrap it up there. We'll have you both back, though, for a future show. Mr. Sturdivant, Mr. Carr, thank you both for coming by. Kent and I will have a few final thoughts when we return. You're watching The Verdict with Mick Cornett and Kent Myers.
Hello, my name is Ted Smith. I'm president of the board of directors of the Oklahoma Disability Law Center. ODLC provides free legal services in civil matters to people with physical and mental disabilities.
I'm Mike Sykes, Vice President of ODLC. For more information, call 1-800-880-7755.
The Oklahoma Disability Law Center provides high-quality legal services to people with physical and mental disabilities.
Boy Scouts of America, where above all else, character counts.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities, parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
We are wrapping up another edition of The Verdict. Kent, some final thoughts.
Yeah. Do you see anything new?
I love this set.
Yeah. Can we
This is
back up and
snazzy.
show a little bit of this set that looks terrific? I
is
wanted
really
to thank Chris Turner and Mike Waters and all the crowd at the University of Oklahoma studios where we film for this nice new set. We like it a lot, and we appreciate the efforts in that regard. One thing I want our viewers to keep in mind is that we didn't ask these lawyers on this show some of the other questions that we want to know about trial lawyers. For instance, huge attorney's fees being
That's
awarded.
the image, that the attorneys make all the money.
Yeah.
That's the public perception in many cases.
That is, and there are some instances where lawyers in these type of class actions and huge tobacco cases have made enormous fees. Well, we're not avoiding that. We're just going to cover it in the next show with these same two guests, and they will be prepared to talk about that, and I think it will be interesting. In the meantime, we'd like our viewers to get on our website and answer this question: do we have too much litigation? That question will be under the opinion poll section, and if you'll register your vote yes or no and let us know what you think, we'd appreciate it.
www.theverdict.tv. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next week on The Verdict.
This program was brought to you by Crow and Dunlevy, a professional corporation, and also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma.